All right, here we are at this question 4, which is actually the third question on our test for this End Unit 4 test on inverse functions and translations. So let's read. Most importantly, you just need to read it really carefully and see what they're talking about. The equation m equals 40g gives the distance in miles m that a car can travel using g gallons of gas. So let's take that in for a second. The equation m equals 40g gives the distance in miles m that a car can travel using g gallons of gas. And they tell me if the car has gone 140 miles, how much gas did we use? So basically in math, most of the time, if somebody gives you a number, they want you to plug it into something, right? We could plug it into G or M. So we got to decide, is this 140, is it G? Did we go 140G or 140M? Well, it says the car has gone 140 miles. Well, M represents the miles the car has traveled. So let's plug in 140 in for M. And what are we doing when we plug in 140 for M? We're just swapping it out. Just get rid of the M. Sorry, a little technical difficulty here. There we go. Maybe that's a little better. Let's trade out this M and plug in 140 right there and find out how many gallons we used. Okie dokie. All right, the car's gone 140 miles. How much gas did we use? So we're going to plug it in. Swap out the M. Goodbye, M. Hello, 140. And then I'll put the rest of this in blue so we know where the 140 came from. That's highlighted in orange right there. We went 140 miles. How many gallons did we use? 40 times G. So if I want to find out how many gallons I used, I need to get G by itself. And right now, what I've got here is G times 40. So how am I going to cancel out that times 40? If you see two things next to each other, they're being multiplied right there. Let's divide by 40. We're going to do the opposite of multiplication. That's division. If we divide by 40, it will cancel out the 40 right there. And then we'll have G all by itself, just like we wanted. But guess what? If you do something to one side, we always do it to the other side of this equal sign. In math, you got to keep everything even on both sides. Do something to one side, do it to the other. So I'm going to grab my calculator. What's 140 divided by 4? If we were thinking about fractions, I see both of those things are divisible by 20. This is basically divide 140 by 20, you get 7. You divide 40 by 20, you get 20. You get 2. What we've got here is 7 halves. That's 3.5. Half of 7 is 3.5. So we're looking at, we used 3.5 gallons. G equals 3.5. So just figure out what you need to plug in, where it goes, plug it in, and then get the variable by yourself to solve for what you're trying to find. We used 3.5 gallons to go 140 miles. There's also guess and check. You can plug stuff in for M or for G. You know, we went 140 miles. You could just guess and check without using algebra. You could plug in here. Sorry, let's look. You could plug in 1. If we had 1 gallon, if we used 1 gallon of gas, guess what? 1 times 40, we went 40 miles. If we used 2 gallons of gas, 2 times 40, we would have gone 80 miles. If we had used 3 gallons of gas, we would have gone 120. We're getting a little closer. 120 is not quite 140. So it's greater than 3, and then you could plug in 4 for G and get 160. 160 is too much. We need something between 3 and 4, and that's called guess and check if you're really struggling with the algebra. Don't hesitate. Don't give up. Just use whatever skills you can to try to figure this thing out. Next, B. Write an equation that represents the inverse function of the gallons of gas as a function of distance in miles. So let's start with what they gave us up here. You know what they gave me? They gave me that M equals 40G. What kind of color we want to use here? Let's just go with blue. So let's take this. M equals 40 gallons. We're going to take the original equation. You always need the original function if you're going to find the inverse. Start with what they gave you up here, M equals 40G. And what this is, right here, this is giving me the miles. This gives the miles as a function of the gallons. And the inverse swaps out our input and our output. We're trying to get this input right here. This is the input right here in the original equation. We want to make that our output. So we're trying to get G all by itself. So how can I get G by itself? We just did this a minute ago. Let's get that 40 away from G so we can figure out what G is. Let's use purple here for my inverse operation. It's 40 times G. I'm going to do the opposite. That's what inverse means. Inverse operation. We're going to do the opposite. We're divide by 40 to cancel out that 40. If I do something to one side, I got to do it to the other. Guess what? I've got this new inverse function. I'll write it in green. Gallons equals M over 40. Now, this is my inverse function because it gives me the gallons of gas we use as a function of how many miles we went. So you would use this original equation if you knew how many gallons you had used and you wanted to figure out how many miles you went. Ideally is what that would be used for. But now we got this cool new inverse function, and now if we know exactly how many miles we went, we could figure out how many gallons we went. And that would have made this a little bit easier up here. We could have just plugged 140 in right there, divided up by 40, and figured out exactly how many gallons we went. And that is exactly why we need and love these inverse functions.